السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا. May Allah open our hearts and minds for the reception of knowledge, and may Allah ease our learning, and may Allah make it useful for us. Dear students of the Islamic University of Gaza, and in this specific course of the short story, it's actually an honor and a privilege to be able to teach you and to talk to you. And I would like to thank the university for giving me such an opportunity. And I would like to thank your teachers. And I would like to thank you most of all for joining me and having the resilience and having the steadfastness and having the sumud to insist that you are going to seek every element of life and victory in the face of your enemy and in the face of annihilation. It has been said that victory does not only happen in the forefronts of war, it also takes place in the halls of university. And maybe it's a little bit relevant when we're speaking especially about the short story to say that your steadfastness tells a story in itself. Your insistence, tells a story, and it gives the other side of the coin. So insisting on your right to live and to seek education is part of the victory. This is why I'm here with you today, and this is why you are here insisting that even in the tents and even in the war, we are going to learn and we're going to seek education and we're going to, make Gaza better, and we're going to rebuild it, inshallah. My name is Dima Tahboob, and I'm joining you from a very near place whose people are all with you, mind, soul, and heart, with everything they can do. I'm joining you from Jordan, and I'm going to record, the lectures for you in relation to the short story. And please, through our group, feel free to ask any question, to raise any point. Day and night, I'll be there for you, inshallah, and I'm ready to discuss and ask anything that comes to your mind in relation to literature or to the short story. When it comes to the short story, probably in the situation, because I like to make things more relevant, in the situation of, Palestine and Gaza, telling the story is not a luxury. It becomes a necessity because you have to preserve the memory, You have to raise the spirits of the people. You have to tell the other side of the story, to dismantle the story of the enemy. And you have to be able to speak up for yourself. So storytelling, is not, a luxury that, sometimes we can take it and sometimes we can, leave it. It becomes a necessity and a must. And probably even in the midst of war, the stories are very abundant, We need to keep them in mind. We need to write. Please do write now. I know, displacement is not an easy thing. It's the most difficult thing in life. But please, prisoners have written on the walls of prisons, write, It just needs, a pen and a piece of paper. Please write. We need to document our memories and to tell the story to the coming generation and to the world. So in the case of, especially people facing war, telling stories becomes a necessity, not a luxury. And this is why the African writer and critic Achibi has said a very important and relevant quotation. He says, "Until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter." It's symbolic, but it's speaking about, who gets to write the story. Are they the people who've been victimized or the victimizers? He is telling us, if you are the lions and we are the lions, we need to take things into our own hands and we need to write our own stories, because usually history sides with the victimizer, sides with the stronger, even if the country is, a victimizer, still, okay, they get to write the story. But, the world is changing, and now people are listening to the other side of the story. They're listening to the victims. So this tells us about the importance of writing and telling stories. And there was another critic, his name is Chamberlain. He said, if this is your land, okay, where are your stories? Because, the stories you have about your heritage, about your family, about what people used to do, during weddings and funerals, their customs, their traditions, tell us, okay, more than, a very simple story of who's there and who went and who did. They're telling us that they are a part of the history of this land. They have lived there. Their parents have lived there. They have died there. And this is their land. This is why stories become a document, okay? Not only for entertainment, not just, to please people or to remember things. It becomes a document that proves that you are the rightful owners of a certain land, of a certain culture. So this tells us a little bit about, why stories are important and why do they exceed their literary or aesthetic, value. People, by the way, they love telling stories, and even the holy books, some of their verses were revealed also in stories. Since the early creation of humanity, okay, people have been telling stories, whether oral or written or sometimes in drawing. You remember, that the caveman, they've been drawing on the walls of caves, and they have been telling stories through that. So storytelling is, as ancient as, humanity, and it's probably something built in the system of human beings, okay? And it started, part of it, as I said, as oral, and the other part as, written. From the oral literature, our mothers, our grandmothers, our elderly have been telling us, oral stories all along. Folk tales, for example, nursery rhymes, all of these short stories have been a part of our tradition. Now, when you read a story, it's very important, okay, to be conscious, especially as a student, okay, when you read it. Some people read it just for entertainment. Some people read it, especially for children, for example, to teach them a certain lesson, a certain moral, okay? But as students of literature, we need to be also aware of the other motives that are presented in a story. So some of the questions that come to our mind, okay, when we read a story, for example, who's telling the story, okay? Where is the story being told? When is the story being told? What is the point of view, the moral, the theme in the story? Who are the characters, okay? Does it have a plot that is chronological, meaning that it starts from A to Z, okay? Or do we start from the middle of the story or from the end of the story? All of these matters should come to your mind as a student of literature trying to analyze what a story is. Now let's take a step back and define probably what a story is. According to the Merriam-Webster Encyclopedia of Literature, a short story is defined as following: a brief fictional prose, okay? Let's just, concentrate a little bit on these three characteristics. It's brief, okay, and hence comes the word short story, because in other genres or types of literature, we have other, let's say, types of literature that are longer. They're not brief, okay? We have epics, we have plays, we have novels and novellas, okay? But a short story by definition should be, okay, brief. The other thing is that it's fictional. And being fictional, okay, does not mean that it does not include any points of reality, okay? It means that, for example, that the story did not happen in reality. Maybe it's imagined, okay, although there are stories that are realistic and they happened in real life. But this is how, the Encyclopedia of Literature defines the story. It's fictional, okay. And why is it defined as brief? To be able to distinguish it from longer narratives, okay, such as the novel, as we said. The short story is usually concerned with a single effect conveyed in a single significant episode, meaning that the duration of the short story, the time frame, does not extend, for example, as I said, in epics, al-malahim, or in plays, al-masrahiyat, or in novels, al-riwayat. The duration in the short story is also short, okay? And you have a limited number of characters, okay? Also to preserve the idea of it's short, so you do not have a lot of people, in the story taking part in that story. And this form, which is, a single event, a limited time of characters, okay? It gives you a concise narration, okay? And usually it has a theme or a message or a moral at the end. Sometimes stories are open-ended, okay? Not all stories, especially in modern schools of literature, should have an ending. Sometimes it's left to the imagination of the reader or the audience, okay? But usually, at least the traditional school, gives you that, well, there is a beginning, an introduction, and there is an ending. So once again, just to recap what we said about the definition of a short story, short by definition means short, okay? It has to have a short duration or period of time. The number of characters is not that big, okay? It speaks about a single event. The plot is not very complicated, and usually you have also a message at the end or a moral at the end. Now, in terms of the elements of a short story, and you remember I've just asked you a number of questions and said, well, when you read a short story, a student of literature, okay, should explore these questions, okay? And these questions of who's telling the story, when is the story written, where does it occur, who are the characters, are all related to the 5 key elements that make up a short story. These elements are as follows, and we're going to explain them one by one. The first is the setting, okay? The second is the plot, and the third element is the characters, and the fourth element is the point of view, and the fifth and last element is the theme. So once again, we have a setting, we have a plot, we have characters, we have a point of view, and we have a theme or themes, okay? These are the 5 key elements that as a student, as a teacher, as a reader, you have to be able to concentrate on to understand the meaning and the message from this story. Why? Because, to tell you my point of view as a teacher, usually I would say that even in entertainment, literature is not that innocent. Usually writers write for a reason, okay? And in a very great book that I hope you'll get the chance to read, the book is entitled What is Literature? And it's written by Jean-Paul Sartre. And he said something about words and literature in specific that is very relevant and very worthy of, taking it into consideration. He wrote this specific quotation I'm going to read for you, and this tells you that stories are very important, and as a matter of fact, they're not only important, they're very dangerous, and they have a mission. He says in this book, a word is not a gentle breeze which plays lightly over the surface of things, grazing them without alerting them. It's our shell and our antenna. It protects us against others and informs us about them. Literature throws you, the writer and the reader, into battle. Once you have begun, you are committed. Okay? So at least as professionals, as experts, as students of literature, we cannot actually treat literature, and in this case, short stories, as a thing, as a matter or a type or a genre for just entertainment. It has a very important and very crucial role. So going back to the elements of, the short story. What is the setting? Okay, what is the setting? The setting, and of course, in the coming lectures, we're going to apply all of these elements, plus the artistic techniques we're going also to discuss. We're going to apply and scrutinize the stories, I'm going to send you. And I've already, in our group, I've pinned the story we're going to start with, although it's not from the early beginnings of the story, short stories. But I'd like to start with this story because it's relevant to our context. It's relevant to you, our dear students. The story is entitled A Letter from Gaza, and it's written by the glorious writer, Palestinian writer, Ghassan Kanafani. So I've pinned that story in our group, and we're going, please, if you have the chance to read it, okay, read it. Write, answers for the questions I've just raised: who, where, when, why, okay? And we're going to discuss them and apply the elements of the story, the short story, in relation to this story in specific. So, coming back to the setting is what is the time and place when and where the story occurs, okay? So the time is part of the setting and the place is part of the setting, okay? We have to know that, the setting can be foregrounded or backgrounded. What does this mean? The setting can be important, okay? It's important in understanding the short story. It's important in conveying its message, and it could be something in the background. For example, to give you an example how the setting could be important, if you are dealing with a story that is related to the genre of the literature of prison, for example, Adab al-Sujun, okay? Of course, the setting here, the place where the story takes place is very important, because you cannot imagine that a person who's writing in the prison is like, for example, a person who's writing in a garden, okay? So here the setting is being foregrounded and given prominence, okay, and an effect on the procession of the short story, on its themes and on its characters. So in terms of time and place, the setting can be important and foregrounded, and sometimes it could be just an element in the background telling the reader or the audience, well, the story takes place in this specific period of time in history or in this specific place, okay? You would expect also when the setting is foregrounded, for example, when a story takes place in the evening, it's not like when it takes place in the daytime, for example. If it's summer, it's not like winter, okay? If it's war, it's not like the time of peace, okay? So all these elements are very important when understanding and analyzing the short story, okay? And of course, we're going to apply all of this when we discuss the story next week or in the next lecture. As for the plot, which is the second important element in the short story, the plot means the arrangement or sequence of events in a story, okay? Events that take place in the story and how they are arranged. Is the story being told from A to Z? Does the story starts from the childhood to the adulthood of the characters, or does it start sometime from the middle? Okay, when the character is in let's say a youth, not a child. Okay, Does it start from the end and goes back in a flashback going back to the beginning, okay? Does it start from the end and goes back to the beginning of the story to tell us what has happened and affected this time, which is the end? So all of these types of plots are very important to understand, whether they are chronological plots from A to Z, from 1 to 10, for example. Do they proceed, regularly and normally, or do we start from the middle? And in Latin, it's called medias res. Medias res means in the middle. Or does it start at the end and then goes back to tell the origins of the story from the beginning? All these things are very important and very effective techniques, in storytelling. And of course, those of you who have read stories or even who've seen films, that have been adapted from the stories would understand all these techniques, starting from the beginning, starting from the middle, or starting from the end, Another point in the plot, we should understand that the plot, usually in the classic or normal way of procession, it has a kind of a diagram, The first starting point is called the introduction or the exposition, In the introduction, from the word introduce, you're going to tell the reader what's there in the story. Who's there, where it's happening, when it's happening, what's the major problem, This is what an introduction or an exposition means, Introducing the main aspects of the story. Sometimes all of them, sometimes not necessarily, but it's an introduction that usually, should what? Should hook the reader. Because, a story, either in Arabic we have a saying, المكتوب ببين من عنوانه. So either you're attracted from the beginning, or you would close that story and you would put it in the library and not read it. So an exposition and an introduction, although it's, one of the, let's say, the basic start of the story, but it's very important in attracting the attention of the reader. So sometimes, writers are very colorful in their styles and they have their techniques of beginning and so on. But usually the beginning of the story is called an introduction and an exposition. It's meant to introduce, the story, the characters, the main theme, and it's very important in attracting the attention of the reader and the audience and encouraging them to continue reading. The other part of the plot is the rising action. And, let's say the expressions are very relevant and self-explanatory. When you say rising action, this means This means that the plot now is becoming more complicated, Because each story should have a certain problem, should have a certain dilemma, should have a certain thing that is complicated, and then it will have a solution. Because normal stories are like news items, do not really attract maybe some of the readers. So in a story, what makes a story different, from, for example, a regular news item, is that there's a complication, there is a point of climax, and then, it moves into a certain solution. This is why you're interested as a reader to continue reading. So here, from its name, from the expression, it's a rising action, The plot is becoming more complicated, more problematic, until it reaches the most complicated point of tension, And this most complicated point is given the literary term of a climax, What is the climax? It's the most tensed, most complicated point in the story. After which, this is the climax here at the top, after which what happens? The events start to go down. And I'm very interested in Arabic literature. The poet in Arabic says, ضاقت فلما استحكمت حلقاتها فرجت. Okay, this is the nature of things. When you come to the most complicated point, okay, actions start, getting more relaxed. You're heading towards a certain solution. And probably this is why stories make us also optimistic in life, that this is the nature of life. At the most complicated point of tension, there is always Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and things start to move into a solution. Okay, this is stories, these are stories, and this is also the nature of life and humanity. So the most complicated point, the highest point of tension, is called what? A climax. Then in the climax, okay, you have this turning point, because events are going to go into what? Into the falling action. So the next step in the plot is what? The falling action, and they guide the reader into the solution, or in French what we call the denouement. The denouement is a term meaning the resolution or the solution of the story. Here you get, the stories are uncomplicated. The solution, there is the ending. If the story carries the normal pattern, the righteous people are victorious and the evil people get their punishment, and so on, unless the story has a different technique and a different message, because sometimes in modern stories they do not go by the fairy tale ending, so to speak, that everything goes in the right pattern and everyone lives happily ever after and people get married, and okay, it does not happen all the time in this way. But usually the more traditional pattern usually includes a solution or a resolution, whether we consider it optimistic or pessimistic. So once again, the plot, okay, which is the second element of the short story, usually has a certain pattern, okay? The normal pattern starts with the exposition or the introduction. It moves into the rising pattern, and then the most complicated point is called the climax. And then after the climax, the events head into the falling action and they end with a resolution, okay? So we're going also to apply this to the story when we come. We're just introducing we're introducing them now, theoretically, just for you to understand the terms and to understand their meanings. Next lecture, we're going to put them into action. Now, in terms of characters, and usually this is a very integral and important part of the story, which, or who are the characters. And the characters, of course, like in real life, some people are heroes or heroines when it comes to a female. And some people are just helping characters. They help in creating the hero or the heroine. And some characters are just very minor or stock characters. This is why we have the differentiation between major characters, okay, on whom the action depends, and we have minor characters who are just helpers for the movement of the action. So we have major characters, the most important characters, the heroes and heroines of the story, and we have minor characters. Another point of discussion or characteristics of characters, they're also called dynamic or static characters. Dynamic, by definition, means that they are the important characters that help the plot to develop, or static characters, by definition also, who are not very important and they are just helpers in moving the action. So sometimes characters are dynamic and sometimes other times they are static. Another also differentiation between characters, characters are also called round characters and flat characters. Round characters are characters which relay more than one face, or they have more than one point to their characters. So sometimes you find them very fragile. Sometimes you find them fragile. Sorry. Sometimes you find them very strong. Sometimes you find them very simple. Sometimes you find them very complicated, okay? Having more than one face, having more than one aspect to their characters. This is what we call a round character. While a flat character is a character that has only, one face, one perspective to their characters, okay? And they are usually minor characters. So if we want to place them all together, major characters are usually round characters, and they're usually also dynamic characters, while on the other end, flat characters are usually static characters and minor characters. Major characters are the shakers and the movers, while minor characters are the helpers or the stop characters, okay? They are there because they help the major characters to grow, to prosper, and they only help in the procession of the plot, okay? So this is one, usually also another literary term, which is a very important term for also classifying major characters or hero characters. We call them also, or we call the hero character a protagonist, okay? What does a protagonist mean? He or she are the main major heroes and characters in the story, while the other characters, which are usually in their opposition, okay? We call them foil characters, we call them antagonists, okay? We call them anti-hero characters. They are usually the characters that are placed in opposition, okay? Or the enemies of the heroes and heroines and major characters. So I know the terms are a lot, okay, but once we start, discussing them and applying them to the stories, it's going to be a piece of cake, and you'll just tell them and be able to distinguish between them as as easy as possible. Okay, another point also that helps us in understanding characters. Physical appearance and how a character is described is very important in understanding him or her. So you have to put these helping points into consideration. How does a character appear? How do they dress? How do they talk? Okay, is there a description of their body language? Okay, all of these important points are crucial when understanding or describing a certain character. This is why, for example, why do I like the short story course? Because sometimes, and hopefully, some of you will have the talent not only to be able to analyze or discuss a short story, but even to write it. And you remember, one of the most important aspects or skills in writing a short story is the ability to describe, or descriptive language. And in descriptive language, what do you describe about a character? You describe the physical appearance, you describe the body language, the colors they're wearing, and so on and so forth. So physical appearance is important in understanding a character. What he or she says or thinks, okay, their language, their thoughts are very important. What he or she does, their actions, and what other characters say or feel about them. These are important elements in also understanding or writing about characters. So we've started with the setting, we moved into the plot and its different stages, and we have also spoken about the third element, which is the characters and what types of characters we have and how do we understand them. And the fourth element is the point of view. The point of view means the angle from which the story is told. Okay? Who is telling the story? Are they participants in the story? Are they major participants or minor participants? Are they just narrating the story and telling the story, but they're not taking part in the story? All these aspects give us a different point of view. So if the narrator is only a narrator in the story, its different from when the narrator is a narrator and a participant in the story. And to distinguish between these 2 points of view, we have, what is called, the term in narration is called the first narrator, or the first point of view. And this is when the story is being told by one of the characters in the story. So when the narrator, al-Rawi, is a character in the story, and he's a participant, we call this a first narrator, or a first person point of view. Now, another type is called the third person or omniscient narrator. What does this mean? When the narrator knows everything about the characters, because the word omni, means all, and shint means from science or knowing. So the term omniscient means all knowing. And here the narrator moves from one character to the other, with unlimited access or unlimited knowledge to their ideas and also to their inner selves. In this specific point, the third person can be, as I said, omniscient, all-knowing, he knows the inside out, so to speak, about the characters. And sometimes the narrator also can be limited, meaning he or she as a narrator do not know all the characteristics of a certain character. So the narrator, the third person, can be limited or can be omniscient. When the narrator is omniscient, the word omniscient means all-knowing, so he knows everything. For example, let me give you the character of the nanny, in literature. A person who's been with the children from their childhood into an adulthood. So usually the nanny, for example, classifies as an omniscient narrator because she, for example, the nanny is usually a she. So she knows everything about the character from childhood to adulthood. So usually a nanny is classified, for example, as an omniscient narrator. But some other narrators, maybe they don't know everything about the main characters, so they are limited and not omniscient, The other point is that the narrator can be subjective or objective, A narrator sometimes is not always honest, and he or she does not always tell us, the truth. So here it becomes a little bit more complicated when the narrator is being subjective towards a certain character, for example, out of love, out of hate, out of what have you, And here the narrator tends to complicate the story because as part of the audience or as the reader, you have to be able to discover whether the narrator is being honest and objective, or he or she is hiding part of the truth and being, subjective, not telling all of the truth. So here, this is, gives us an idea about the narrator, or the point of view or the angle from which the story is being told. Now, as for the theme, the word theme means the ideas, the morals, the meaning that is being conveyed by the story, And usually, if the story, let's say, follows the traditional pattern, we usually have themes being conveyed in this story. We have ideas, we have a controlling idea, we have a certain moral, But, with modern stories, sometimes, the writer tends to be vague, ambiguous. He or she may choose to write an open-ended story and leave the theme or the moral or the controlling idea to the reader, to fill in the blanks, so to speak. So the theme is usually very important because it enables us to understand, the meaning of the story, and we have the concluding message. Why has this story been written? Is it, for example, to teach us something? Is it to warn us from something? Is it to preserve a certain memory? Is it to document a certain event? Is it only for entertainment? Okay, especially there was a view that children's stories, for example, should be more entertaining than teaching. So these are some of the themes that we have when we understand the main message or the controlling idea or the main idea in a story. So once again, stories are very important, okay? And if we come out with the result or conclusion that this course enables you to document your stories and to feel proud of what you're facing and what you're dealing with, and to be able to tell people about them and to be able to document them for the memory of the coming generation, I think by that we would have got the gist and the most important thing about this course. Stories are important, they're even dangerous, they're crucial, and they have a noble mission, especially when it comes to the people of Gaza and the people of Palestine and any people in the world that are being victimized and are in the condition of war and genocide. So this is very important for us, understanding the importance of storytelling, understanding that it's been a part of the nature of humanity to tell stories all along, whether oral or written stories or even drawn stories. Stories have been also in nursery rhymes, in lullabies, and they've been sung also. Humankind has been telling stories since its creation. We also have defined in this lecture the meaning of the short story, and the most important crucial part is the idea of short, okay? Short in message, short in duration, short in character, short in everything. But let's say the theme and the moral should not be short, it should be effective and lasting. We also discussed in this lecture the 5 elements of the short story, starting with the setting, which includes time and place, and then we've moved into the plot with its diagram, how it proceeds from the exposition to the rising action to the most complex point known as the climax, and then it falls into the falling action and then into the denouement or the resolution or the ending, okay? And then we've moved to the third part or third element of the short story, the characters, and we also classified or discussed the different classifications and definitions, and how do we understand the characters, what are we looking into when we try to understand a certain character. And then we went into the point of view or the narration or the angle, which is the 4th element from the short story. And it discusses, the point of view or the narrator and what types of narration we have. And the final element was the theme, and it discusses the idea in the story, the main lesson, the controlling idea, the moral, okay? And we wrapped up with this final idea about the theme. Now, next time, although usually in the normal procession of discussing stories, we usually start with fairy tales, but we're going to go back into them. But as I told you, I would like to start with something very relevant, okay? Something that would enable us to understand the importance of storytelling. And although the story was written by Ghassan Kanafani, I'm not sure, I'll check the date, maybe in the 50s or the early 60s, and it's entitled A Letter from Gaza, but you will find it very relevant to the situation you are living and we are living. So I would like to start with this story. I've pinned it, as I said, in our group, okay? If you're able to read it, please read it. and look for the elements we have discussed in this lecture, and we're going to discuss them, or to discuss the story in length, inshallah, in our coming lecture. I reiterate my extreme pleasure in having the chance to talk to you, in having the chance to discuss such an important aspect of life, which is literature, and hopefully that you will really appreciate the great step you are taking of saying we will learn, we will educate ourselves, and we will overcome. In your tents, you are the most honorable of humanity. In your displacement, you are entrenching and enshrining Gaza in the annals of history and humanity. People will remember, and history will remember your sacrifices, and we will write, and you will write, and come back at this genocidal entity known as the Zionists. We are going to write back, and you are going to write back, and we will never stop telling until freedom, inshallah. Thank you very much. I have my name is Dima Tahboob again. I'm there on social media. Please, you are most welcome to reach out for anything that you want to ask about. Day and night, I'm at your disposal, I'm at your service, and you're granting me an honor, actually, to be able to communicate with you and for us to discuss things, whatever comes to your mind. Literature is as wide as humanity, okay? It's not only the short story, anything that comes up to your mind. And please, if there are amongst you any student who has the ability or the skill to write, okay, let's do this together. And hopefully by the end of this course, we will have a writer or more than one amongst us, and we will be able to read his or her production, his or her short story, and discuss it. And we will be the first audience and the first positive critics for that story. So please think of that, because you have a lot to write about. You have a lot to document. You have a lot to tell people worldwide. So yes, think about that. And maybe we'll have the next writer or writers amongst us in this course. Thank you very much. في رعاية الله وفي أمان الله. I'm waiting for your feedback. I'm waiting for your questions and comments. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.